Welcome to Economics. Today we'll be explaining the essay, How do you write a business cycle essay based on phases. Let's start. Firstly, you need to write your introduction. Introduction. In your introduction, we expect you to write a meaning. What is a business cycle? Now, a business cycle refers to fluctuations in the economic activities over a period of time. So that's your meaning for business cycle. Now we have 4 phases. Remember, 4 phases. Before we start the main essay, we need to remember 4 phases. Phase 1, we have recovery. Phase 2, we have prosperity. Phase 3, we have recession. Phase 4, we have depression. Remember, in us writing the essay, the first thing that we are going to do is to write this as a subheading. We write the meaning. After the meaning, we explain. Give explanations. For all phases, we are going to do the same thing. Prosperity, for example, we are going to write a meaning and explanation. For all of them, we do the same thing. For all of them. Okay? Now, let's start. Recovery phase. That's your subheading. You get 1 mark for writing that. Now, the first thing, remember, we said that we are going to write what? We are going to write the meaning. What is the meaning for recovery phase? It is indication of an increase in the economic growth rate. That's your meaning. Indication of an increase in the economic growth rate. That means the economy is starting to grow. Now, I'm going to keep on writing this box to remind you that we have certain economic activities that we have to include in each phase. We have employment, we have production or GDP. We have prices, income, and spending. Now, in each phase, you need to remember that all these 5 economic activities are what makes a business cycle. Now, as we can see the meaning, it says indication of an increase in the economic growth rate. It means that with you spicing up your answers, but you need to include employment in your answer. You have a sentence about GDP or production, a sentence about prices, a sentence about income, a sentence about spending. You can write it in your own way, but your sentences must show that there is an increase in economic growth rate. Now, when there's an increase in economic growth rate, for example, it means that employment, there's an increase. So, employment starts to increase. You see, that's a sentence. Production or GDP, you can say production starts to take place. Do you see that? Prices start to increase. Households income starts to increase. And lastly, you can say households, which is 8, spending starts to increase. Do you see that? What is important is to show that the growth rate has started. There's an increase in the growth rate. Now that the economy was in depression, now the economy is improving. That's what needs to be shown. Let's go to the next phase. The next phase is prosperity. Prosperity. Now, remember, the first thing in an essay that we write, we must write about what? About the meaning. What is the meaning of prosperity? Now, it is when an economy is really growing or improving quickly. That's your meaning. That's your meaning for prosperity. When an economy is really growing or improving quickly. Now, we must explain now. What do we mean? We need our GDP, our income, our employment. We need our prices and also spending. So, you talk about GDP. It means that GDP has increased and is increasing very quickly. So, we see an increase in GDP. We have an increase in income, an increase prices, spending, employment. So, all of them, we can say a quick increase in GDP, quick increase in income, a quick increase in prices, spending, and employment. Let us move to recession. Now, a recession, it refers to a period where there has been a decline for 2 consecutive quarters in economic activities. Explanation. Production, employment, income, spending, prices. Again, there's a decline. Okay? The economy starts to decline. Okay? So there's a decline in production. So decline, employment, income, spending, prices. So when economic activities are starting to decline in all these aspects. Now, lastly, we have the last phase, which is depression. Depression. Now, what is a depression? This phase will come after recession, and the growth rate will get to 0. Now, the phase where growth rate comes close to 0. Table. Employment, GDP. Remember GDP, you can also use production on this one. Income, spending, prices. Okay, now remember here this is the worst state, so there's an extreme decrease. So we are going to say extreme decrease in, we mentioned the economic activity, employment in this case, extreme decrease in GDP, decrease in income, spending, and prices. So at the end, we have to write your conclusion. Your conclusion depends. What we normally look at in a conclusion, we look at, you can recommend, you can give advice, you can support a statement, or be against a statement. Now, in this case, in a business cycle, one can advise the government on what to do on each phase. But remember, we just need 1 or 2 sentences. So you can advise a government on what to do, for example, to keep the economy in an upswing, or to keep the economy, to get the economy out of a depression or downswing. So conclusion really depends on which point you want to argue about. Thank you.